In these last two lessons of this chapter, we're going to look at two different tools that allow us to manipulate the shape of our object. In this lesson, we'll look at an interactive tool known as the envelope tool, and then in the next lesson, we'll open up a Docker that allows us to manipulate the corners of an object. In both cases, though, we're going to use the same file that I've already opened up here. It's called envelopes1.cdr, so if you've got these exercise files and you want to follow along, go to your Lesson 10 folder to find this one. It's a two-pager. You can see down below I'm on page 1 where I see my green onion logo and some clip art. We're going to work with our logo here first using the envelope tool to manipulate its shape. And this is very similar to using the shape tool, as you'll soon find out. Let's click on our object, which is actually a group of objects, but it will be treated as one because they are grouped. And now let's go over to our toolbox here. We've got some interactive tools, and this fifth button from the bottom is a flyout. So when I click and hold my mouse button down, I'll see the blend tool, contour, distort, drop shadow. There it is right there, the envelope tool. And notice that on the flyout there in the little pop-up tip, it is an interactive envelope tool. That means we can manipulate on the fly. So let's click the envelope tool. My handles have disappeared around the outside of my object, but I do see these little nodes in each corner and at the midpoints of each line around the outside. So the envelope in this case is rectangular in nature and it's snug up against the edge of my logo. So if I want to make some changes, I just start clicking and dragging nodes. Let's see what the defaults have to offer just by going to this top node. I'm going to click and drag straight up. Now I can go side to side as well, but I want to try and go as straight up as possible. And when I let go, you can see how the entire object has been reshaped. Everything's been kind of pushed up to the top and stretched to fill in those gaps. Let's go over to the right side and click and drag that mid handle in a little bit. Same thing on the left, ever so slightly. Everything gets squished in the middle. So that's using the defaults. And if we look at our property bar when using the envelope tool, there are a ton of options. We've got presets. We can add and remove nodes just like we did with the shape tool. We've got some options for the curves, cusps, and keeping symmetrical curves and arcs. You can see we've got convert to curves right from here if we had to do that. So if you had some kind of bitmap object, for example, you wanted to use the envelope tool on, you can convert to curves right from here. And then we've got some options for the envelope function. And we're going to use these very shortly, but right now the one that's selected by default here is the unconstrained mode. That's why we're able to drag up, left, right, all around and totally manipulate this shape to customize it to be exactly what we want. We also have some options over here on the right hand side. We're going to look at this guy here to create an envelope from another shape, but this last one allows us to clear the envelope and start over. So I'm going to click on that. It even turns off my envelope tool, so I got to go back to my toolbox to click it. And let's start with those presets. When I click the presets drop down, you can see they're just labeled envelope 1 through 6. Those are the defaults. And as I hover over them, you can see circular, square, there's a parallelogram. We've got kind of squished in at the top and the bottom. There's a banner that's kind of curved down, and there's one curved up. So if you wanted to apply any of these, you just click on it, like envelope 5, for example, and you can see the end result. If you don't like it, well, you can click undo or just simply remove that envelope altogether to start over. I'm going to click undo. Now there are 6 presets, but notice the plus sign here and the minus sign. This means we can add our own presets. Interesting. So let's go back to what we did earlier. We'll click and drag the top up, drag our sides in just ever so slightly. Let's make it subtle from the left and the right. And let's say that is a preset we want to be able to apply to all kinds of logos. Well, all we have to do is click the plus sign to save it. So I'm going to click the plus sign. Now I go to my envelope folder by default, and all I have to do is type in a name for this. I'm going to call this Logos 1 and click the Save button. Now I've got a new preset in there. So if I was to remove this, I'm going to clear the envelope, go back to my envelope tool, and I wanted to apply that same effect, that same envelope. I go up to my presets now. Check it out. There's one called Logos 1, and when I click on it, it's instantly applied. I didn't have to go clicking and dragging nodes. Of course, I can manipulate this further. The nodes are still there if I wanted to. But before we do that, let's just undo the envelope and check out some of the other modes over here. First one is straight line mode. So when I click on this, you're going to see a different effect. When I go to the right-hand side, for example, and I click and drag out, I can't go up and down. The node can only go left to right, so it's constrained. And you can see the lines are actually quite straight. Doesn't mean the end result will be perfectly straight lines, but the actual clicking and dragging shows me straight lines. When I let go, you can see the effect. Let's undo that and look at another option, which is a single arc mode. When I click on this, I'm still constrained in that when I click and drag my border here, the node, I can't go up and down, just left to right. So I'm kind of creating the letter D, for example, using the single arc mode. And of course, my entire logo stretches to fill in the space. I'm going to undo that. And let's try out our double arc mode. And this is kind of like what we saw with unconstrained, but when we click and drag, we get that double arc, but we just can't go up and down. So it is somewhat constrained. So come out here, and that looks totally different. I'm going to undo that. Takes us back to unconstrained. Now, of course, when I click and drag out, it looks like double arc, except I can move up and down as well. You'll also notice that when I let go, I've got these little arrows, so I can change the direction of the curve if I wanted to, just by clicking and dragging. I can stretch it, rotate it until I get the shape I'm after. And you can see that's a little bit more bottom heavy when I do that. So lots of options with our envelope tool. I'm going to remove that, and I'm going to deselect my selected object, and I'm going to draw a shape. I'm going to go up here to my rectangle tool and make sure I'm selecting the 3-point rectangle. Here's a cool effect. All I have to do is draw my shape by clicking and dragging across, and now I'm going to drag down, and you can see that would be a perfect rectangle. Well, I've already got that with my logo, so if I wanted to manipulate this and borrow from the shape, I can do that. I'm going to hit Escape, and I'm going to start over, and this time I'm going to click and drag on an angle. And now when I come down this way and click, I've got a rectangle that's kind of on a tilt. Now if I'd like to apply this to my logo, I can borrow that and create an envelope out of my shape. So I'm going to go back up to my pick tool, and I'm going to click on the object that I actually want to manipulate, my logo. And I'm going to go over to the envelope tool. And instead of clicking and dragging nodes, I'm going to borrow an envelope from an existing shape. And that's the eyedropper tool you see up here. Create envelope from. I give it a click. I come over to my shape. I click on it, and you can see the outline now of what's about to be created. And it looks like I might want to adjust this slightly. I'm going to go to this top right node. All I have to do is click and drag ever so slightly to apply. I'm just going to create a little bit of perspective here by clicking and dragging and releasing. And now I've actually applied the envelope based on an existing shape. So I'm going to go back to my pick tool. I'm going to click on the shape I borrowed the envelope from and delete it, hitting delete on the keyboard. And now I've got my envelope applied to my existing object. Kind of cool. Let's go back to the envelope tool to remove that. I'm going to click the last button up here, remove it, and try one more cool effect. Notice I've got some wind blowing over here and the leaves are blowing. I'm going to click on this object and just make it a little bit bigger. Now I'm going to go over to my Green Onion logo, and this kind of drives home the point of some of the creative things you can do with the envelope tool. I'll just give it a click here, and I'm going to start clicking and dragging as though the wind is kind of blowing this off to the left a little bit. Change the corner. There we go. Change the angle. I'm going to bring this one in. And you can see the effect that I'm getting here out of that blowing wind. If I wanted to go to another object and apply an envelope, I could as well just by clicking it, including my leaves over here with the wind blowing. I'm going to go back to my pick tool to see the end result. And hopefully that gets you thinking. The possibilities are really endless with the envelope tool. Some of the things you can do to get creative will amaze you working with any object or group of objects. Remember, it's interactive, so just clicking and dragging till you see what you like. And don't forget, if it's something you want to use over and over, save it as a preset. In the next lesson, we'll continue to use this file, but we're going to work the corners of one of our rectangles.